I'm visiting America's newest theme park. It's got the craziest coasters, a Disney-level shooting ride, and I'm starting with the park's craziest coaster. It's named Matagani, and even though it's really small, it's kinda insane. The ride starts with a wild launch out of the station with no warning. 1 second I was sitting there, and the next I was gone. The rest is just as wild, with this comically short hill, tons of moments that threw me out of my seat, and this absolutely insane twist that held me upside down for scarily long. This is a 4-star coaster, and it's just the first of the crazy rides we'll get to ride, like the weirdest water ride I've ever seen, the worst coaster I've ever ridden, and way more. But first, I journeyed over to the Muraland for what looks like it could be the best ride in the park, Volcano Quest for the Golden Idol. This is the park's trackless shooting ride. Yeah, somehow this park in the middle of literally nowhere, Iowa, has a full-scale trackless shooting ride. And it's not just a ride, it's also got a pre-show which sets up the ride's story. We're going on a quest to defeat Volcano, a big stinking fire monster. He was trapped in the Temple of Fire by the power of a magical idol, which was stolen, meaning Volcano has escaped. We gotta reclaim that idol and defeat Volcano. Once I exited the pre-show, I met the Mura Shaman, who tells me just how important it is that I don't fail. He must not know how bad I am at shooting rides. The ride starts with us entering a creepy cave where we spin around to find statues, which we destroy to find the idol. This don't make Volcano very happy though, because he erupts with anger and starts attacking us. We escape pretty easy though and run across the shaman from earlier, who appears out of nowhere to tell us where to go next, which just happened to be where a three-headed dragon was. As we got closer to the temple, we were attacked by lava monsters, a fire bat, a living rock, more fire monsters, and a fire snake, which, oh well, he died fast. After all of that, we finally made it to the Temple of Fire, and it's ham steaming time. We were able to restore the idol, which made Volcano pretty stankin' angry, which wasn't actually that big of a deal because we casually backed out of the temple, which was a really trippy effect.
That was really good.
It's the type of thing that I'd expect from a Disney or Universal park, not some small park in the middle of absolutely nowhere, Iowa, that no one's ever heard of. It's easily a 4.5-star ride, and it's way better than that one Spider-Man themed shooting ride.
Okay, so I'm on vacation and I don't really have time to re-record a section. They just announced that they're adding a new big stinky coaster in 2025. It looks like it should be insane.
Anyways, after I got off Volcano, I went over to one of the most interesting and frankly insane looking rides I've ever seen, Amara Aviators. This ride allowed me to control my ride using these paddles. I could either keep the paddles straight and have a relaxing ride, which would be stankin' lame, or I could rock them back and forth to flip the vehicle. You can probably guess which one I did, or at least tried to do, because it was actually really difficult to figure out how to do a flip. It took me like half the ride to fully flip, but once I was going, I was going. It was crazy, until I stalled out upside down and nearly threw up. Still definitely a 4-star ride, and following that, I went over to the worst roller coaster I have ever ridden, Napuko Air Coaster. This is a model of coaster that's notorious for being just completely awful. Like some of the world's worst coasters are this exact model, so I really wasn't looking forward to riding it, but everything else in the park was so good up to this point that I actually expected it to be good. Oh god, I was wrong. It starts pretty fun with a freakishly quiet lift and a decent drop, but what followed next was so violent, so painful, I don't even know how to explain it. Yeah, you saw that right. This thing was so rough, it launched my glasses off my face. I am so stinking proud of that catch. There has never been a coaster that has done anything similar. Sure, I've ridden rough coasters, but never anything with the pure violence of this thing. It was also one of the most painful things I've ever experienced, and I've experienced some painful things. The rest of the ride wasn't nearly as rough as that, but it still painfully shook its way around with as much grace as a yak falling off a cliff. Oh, and it also vomited up this gunk onto my arm. It's gonna get 0 stars, making it the first coaster in the channel's history to get 0 stars. Is that even possible? Can you even rate something 0 stars? Anyways, let's just move on from that complete disaster and go over to the biggest disappointment of the day, Skyborn. I'm not normally a big fan of drop towers, but this one actually got me pretty excited. The queue is really well themed, having some sick artwork, this thing that looks like a medieval torture device, and even a full-scale pre-show. With all of that, I was expecting the ride to be amazing. It was the most boring drop tower I've ever ridden. It starts with a launch. Kinda. It's more or less just quickly going up half the lift, followed by slowly climbing up the rest. Then it sits there, letting me look down over the park, which was a really cool view, though it did highlight the park's one insanely big problem. I'll talk about that in a second though. For now, it's time to drop. Oh, well, that is technically a drop. It's just lacking speed and that stomach drop sensation. But I mean, hey, at least it bounces a little. Oh, wow, that's That's really disappointing. I'll give it 3 stars. Now, while we were at the top of the tower, I mentioned that the park had one major issue, which you've probably already noticed. There's no shade, like at all. There's no trees, there's no coverings over the path, there's nothing. This does give the park an interesting atmosphere. Being able to look out and see every ride, area, and guest in the park is something I've never seen before, and I kinda like it, but at the same time, it kinda looks god-awful. That's all really besides the point though, because the complete lack of shade makes going to the park an objectively painful experience. I love the heat, but having no escape from the blazing sun on one of the hottest days of the year was awful. I was constantly fleeing into the bathroom because that was my only escape from the sun. It was brutal. Now, all this complaining has made me pretty hungry, so let's go grab some food. This took me to the Awa Land, which is mostly filled with kiddie rides, though it does have this boat battle ride, which I didn't ride because I would have been battling absolutely no one, and another boat ride, which I did ride, but there was a guy behind me talking about his balls the whole ride, so I try and forget I ever did that. I'm not joking, by the way, this actually happened. I just deleted all the footage out of shame because I don't want to think about that. Anyways, it's food time. Who could have seen it coming? I got some lunch from this place in the big stinking tree, and god dang, the food sucked. It was the most astonishingly bad food I've ever had at a theme park. The fries were bland and the burger was ice cold despite me ordering it like 2 minutes before I started recording. I'm a weirdo and I actually like cold food, and I also have the world's blandest food taste, which you could probably tell by my burger having stinking nothing on it, but this was just way too cold and bland even for me. This was filmed about a year ago in 2023, so hopefully they've improved since then. Now after that, it was time to ride one of the weirdest water rides I've ever ridden, Utah Falls. It was one of the biggest rides in the park, and it looks like it'll get me completely soaked. But to be honest, I kinda hate being wet, so I brought a poncho with to keep me dry. The only problem, it's super windy. By the way, if you've been enjoying the video so far, please consider hitting the subscribe button.
Poncho time.
I really wanted to like Utah Falls. I hate how the second half of this video has just been complaining about this ride, complaining about that ride, complaining about the food. This is a good park. It's one of the most unique theme parks I've ever been to. The theming is done to perfection, the lineup is unique for the most part, and it has a vibe to it that no other park I've ever been to has had. But good God, this ride sucked. And it didn't just suck, it sucked in a way that made it the strangest water ride I've ever ridden, which in a weird way made it kinda not suck. That makes no sense whatsoever. Let me explain. So the ride is a log flume that starts with a very slow, honestly very boring float over to the first drop, which drops underneath this big arch that might be my favorite piece of theming in the whole park. This drop is fun and absolutely drenched me, even with the poncho, but from there we entered a section so unimaginably boring, it's genuinely hilarious. For the next 2 minutes, we slowly floated past a whole lot of nothing as we made our way to the big drop. There was no theming, no music, and worst of all, no shade. I genuinely cannot describe how boring this section was. I'm just gonna play 5 seconds of it without background music, without my yapping over top, and I guarantee it will take everything you have not to click off the video. Please don't click off this video. I don't have a job. Ready? Imagine that, but for 2 whole minutes. What makes it all kinda sad is that this was supposed to be one of the park's biggest attractions, but it caught on fire during construction, so not only was its opening delayed, but its theming and ride experience had to be drastically scaled back. Unfortunately, what we're left with is this, one of the most boring rides I've ever ridden, which is also an easy bake oven, but for people. That said, it's kinda hard to look at this and not laugh. Just being stuck in a boat awkwardly with like 5 other people, all in complete silence as we wait for something to happen, is such a funny thing to think about. Add in a frog and 2 decent drops, and you've got the weirdest water ride I've ever ridden. 2 stars. Now, if you want to see even more weird rides, you should check out this video where I visit America's weirdest theme park.